Good morning. How's everybody doing? First Sunday of 2015. You guys are here. That's awesome. Give yourself a big hand. And also for the band this morning, you guys did a great job. Better than me up here singing anyway, so regardless here. If you're here for the first time, I'd like to welcome you to Access Church. My name is Pastor Tim Combs. And if you have a Bible, you want to get that out, or an iPad, iPhone, however it is that you read Scripture this morning. And we're going to be hanging out in the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 26. So if you have that, get your Bible out, hold it above your head. Yes? Oh. Hold it above your head and repeat these words after me like you mean. It's kind of a confirmation kind of a thing that we do. Reminds us of who God says that we are. And we do this every single week, and we're going to start off the year correctly by proclaiming this promise that God has already told us. So here we go. I have been called.
I have been called.
I have been chosen.
I have been chosen.
I am destined to win.
Amen.
If you believe that, turn to the person next to you and say, this is the best you've looked all year. This is the best you've looked all year. And it's dark in here, so that helps. Genesis chapter 26. We're going to begin reading there in verse 12. And let me give you some background if you're not from a church background. This is a story in the life of a guy by the name of Isaac. And Isaac was the son of Abraham, Father Abraham. And Isaac finds himself in kind of a peculiar situation where he has inherited some land and inherited some wealth. And he's gotten to the place in his life where he has become extremely comfortable in his current situation. But as life happens, circumstances arise, and all of a sudden he finds himself in a very serious situation. The Bible says that there is famine in the land. And in this time of famine, in this time of drought, Isaac is forced out of his comfort zone, to say the least, and put in a very serious situation where he doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. He doesn't know what's going to happen in his future. He has no idea. His resources are limited, and he makes a decision in this very, very scary time, scary moment, to follow and trust God without seeing what's going to happen the next day, the next moment. And God begins to move in his life in an incredible way. And we're going to look at this and see how that the situation is not really what you think it is. It looks like a certain way, but when we're done with the story, you're going to see that the situation and how it plays out, it's not what you think. What's happening in his life is not what you think. So Genesis chapter 26, we're going to begin reading in verse 12. And this is what's going on with our boy Isaac. This is what happened. Verse 12. It says this: Isaac planted crops in that land. So he's not in the land that was comfortable to him. He's not in his homeland. He's in the land that he was pushed out of, and in a strange land. So in that land, the Bible says that he planted crops, and in the same year reaped 100-fold. How could that possibly happen? Where like he's in a win-win situation. He's in an unknown land. He decides that he is going to sow. He's going to obey God and do what God tells him to do. And he's going to sow into the land. And look what happens. 100-fold comes back to him because the Lord blessed him. Because the Lord blessed him. You can look back on 2014 and you can look back on all the things that have happened to you. If you made it and you're here today, obviously you have breath in your lungs. You're not in the hospital. All the good things that have happened to you in 2014 are because He has blessed you. If you had a nervous breakdown or you didn't have a nervous breakdown, if you had a nervous breakdown and you got back up from that nervous breakdown and you are here today, it's because He has blessed you. If all of your needs were met in 2014, if you had a couple meals, maybe you could have spared some in 2014, all that is good that has happened to you is because He has blessed you. If you still have people that like you in 2015, it's because He has blessed you. If you still have breath in your lungs, it's because He has blessed you. You've been able to go through everything that you have gone through in 2014 because He has had His hand upon your life and He has blessed you. Honey, don't get it twisted. It's not because you are cute or because you are strong. It's because He has blessed you and His hand has been upon your life. Is the only reason why you are here today and you are not in the hospital or in a straitjacket somewhere is because He has blessed you. You're not talented enough. You don't have enough resources to get it through. It's only because He has had His hand upon your life. This is something that I have to identify in a minute. It's not because of me. It's because He has blessed me enough to get me through. And if His blessing is on you, really, that's all you really need. If you want to have a good resolution for 2015, seek the blessing of God in your life. And you'll be amazed at what He will be able to get you through with the blessing of God that is upon you. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you have or what you don't have. If the blessing of God is on you, you will be amazed, utterly shocked at what He will be able to get you through with the blessing of God. So Isaac is experiencing the blessing of God. He's only where he is at because the Lord has blessed him. In verse 13 it says this, the man, Isaac, became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. And it's not just materialistic wealth. It's being wealthy in other areas of your life. God says that He will give us wealth. He will bless us with riches without sorrow. That means that in every area of our life, we will experience wealth and blessing and riches. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. Verse 14. He had so many flocks and herds that the Philistines envied him. Verse 15, so all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the time of his father Abraham, the Philistines stopped up and filling them with earth. Verse 16, then Abimelech said to Isaac, move away from us, you have become too powerful for us. Verse 17, so Isaac moved away from there and he camped in the valley of Gerar, where he settled in an unknown land. Verse 18, Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the time of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham had died, and he gave them the same names that his father had given them. What I want to get you to recognize today, I don't really necessarily have a title for the message today, but I do have an announcement that in this year, in 2015, we together, corporately, are going to find our flow. We are going to find our flow. And what I want you to do is turn to the person next to you and say, this year we're going to find our flow. This year we're going to find our flow. That God is going to bless us and we are going to find our flow. Now every single year, what I like to do, you could probably do it differently, but I like to have a word for my year. Last year, 2014, it was restoration, and we kind of proclaimed that. I preached about it at the beginning of the year and how that I believe that this was the year that God was going to restore some things that we had lost. And in my life, God has done exactly that. But in 2015, I was trying to figure out what is God trying to say to, if I could put a word on the year of what I'm expecting God to do, what word would that be? And I kind of struggled trying to figure it out. I didn't really have anything that really came to my mind until about a week ago. And the word was, for this year, for us and for the church, fulfillment. That God is going to fulfill everything that He has promised us, everything that He has spoken to us about, that He is going to fulfill every promise that He has given us. But to get to that point and to get to that place, there's some steps that we have to take. And today I want to talk to you about the flow, finding your flow, or another word for the flow would be the zone. Have you ever heard anybody say that they were in a zone? Like athletes, once athletes, basketball, baseball, football, once you get into the zone as an athlete, it's like you're playing your game like you're from another planet. Like nothing can stop you. You become absolutely 100% unstoppable when you get in the zone. This is an actual psychological word, and I want to give you the definition of what it actually means to be in the flow or to be in the zone. It's actually a state of mind. This is what it means. Flow, also known as the zone, is a mental state of operation in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, fully involved and enjoying the process of the activity. You are fully engaged and focused and actually enjoying the process of getting from one point to the next. You are engaged in the process. So if you're taking notes, fulfillment begins with flow. Fulfillment begins with flow. If you're going to be completely fulfilled in what you are doing, you have to understand there is a flow. Everybody who is creative understands this. You may be struggling with an idea, or you're trying to create something and it's hard to come up with the end result, and there's a process that you have to go through. There is a flow that needs to take place. Even in speaking, sometimes in speaking, you'll get into a flow, and you'll go off of your notes, you'll go off of your outline, and things just begin to develop, and things begin to process almost on the dot, and you get into this flow, or this process. Yeah, can someone give me some water?
I recognize it.
You get into this thing where it just kind of seems to happen naturally. You're engaged and focused in the process, fully immersed in what's happening in actually the present. So fulfillment begins with this kind of flow. Everything happens and surrounds things. Everything happens and surrounds around the flow. You can't have life. Thank you. You can't operate in this life without a cash flow. Like, you need that kind of flow to live, right? Like, you have to have money. I wish it wasn't true, but it actually is. You have to have money to live. So there's a flow that is involved in every single area of your life. If you made a resolution this year to get up and to get out and exercise a little bit, you get up in the morning, and it takes a little bit of time to get your blood flowing in the morning. Flow is very, very important. And John chapter 7, verse 37 says this, very important, about understanding this process of getting into the zone or getting into the flow. It says this: on the last and greatest day of the feast, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, streams of living water will what? Will flow from within him." I'm just trying to kind of pinpoint the word and get an understanding of what it means to be in this kind of a zone or to participate in the flow. So Isaac is in a situation where he's forced out of his comfort zone. He's trying to get his flow back. The first thing that he does is he begins to sow. He begins to plant outside of his comfort zone. And it doesn't matter whatever circumstances that you are facing, whatever life throws at you, if you can learn to sow, God will begin to bless you, and you can get back into the flow if you can first learn how to sow. This is the first principle that Isaac learned. He's like, hey, look, I'm in an unknown land. The first thing I'm going to do in the unknown is I'm going to go ahead and I am going to plant. And Isaac sows in a time of famine. It was a time of drought. And he says, still, I'm going to sow in because God has told me to do this. In the middle of my, outside of my comfort zone, I'm still going to trust God that He has my best interest in mind. If you look at Genesis chapter 26, verse 1, it says, now there was a famine in the land, besides the previous famine in Abraham's time, and Isaac went to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, in Gerar. So this was a different kind of a famine, and every generation faces their own difficulty, their own circumstances, their own challenges. And as Abraham faced, so now Isaac faces the situation where he is forced out of his comfort zone and has to trust in God. And his rhythm is thrown off. He's forced in a situation where he has to try to find his flow. First statement is this, write this down. You cannot fulfill your calling in your comfort zone. You cannot fulfill your calling. You cannot figure out why God has placed you here, why God has given you the things that He's given you in your comfort zone. Your calling is figured out outside of your comfort zone. And God pulls Isaac out of his comfort zone and begins to show him what exactly the direction that He wants him to go in. And God will use the famine in our lives to help us to grow. He gives us challenges so that we can grow and become stronger in our faith. God guides us by what He provides, but He also guides by what He withholds. God guides us by what He gives us. God will open doors for you. He'll provide for you. He will show you by what He gives you the direction that He wants you to go in. But He also teaches us and guides us by what He takes away and what He withholds. You might look back at 2014, you might be like, wow, there's a lot of things that did not happen that I thought I wanted to happen. And I thought God wanted to happen for me, but it did not happen. You have to look at that as a signal that, hey, God is guiding you and leading you, not only by what he gives you, but by also what he withholds. You can always be in the flow if you know how to sow. And Isaac, in a time of complete disparity, in a time where God had completely taken him out of his comfort zone, he makes a decision, hey, in this situation, I am going to sow. And I know that even though things probably don't make sense now, that eventually God is going to get me back to where I need to be. In a place of really weird circumstance, of the unknown circumstance, Isaac believes and trusts in God, that God is going to show him through. God will increase your capacity through confrontation. God will increase your capacity through confrontation. You see that even though he's thrown into the unknown, Isaac planted crops in the land, he sowed, and the same year he reaped 100-fold because the Lord had blessed him. Verse 13, then the man became rich, and his wealth, what? Continued to grow until he became very wealthy. Then all of a sudden he's forced into a confrontation kind of a situation. And God is doing this on purpose to expand his capacity. And that's what he's doing to each and every one of us, what he wants to do in this new year. So he throws him into the situation. It says, verse 13, the man became rich and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. Verse 14, he had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. All of a sudden he's forced into this confrontation because the Philistines saw what God was doing in his life. He was thrown into an unknown situation. It was a circumstance that he was not familiar with. He trusted in God. He sowed. And because of that, now all of a sudden he has this drama that he has attracted to him because of his wealth and because God blessed him. People begin to notice. And all of a sudden he has this confrontation. You cannot increase capacity without confrontation. God will sometimes move you out of situations where you are comfortable because he wants to increase your capacity to be blessed. That if you always just stay where you're at, you will never grow, never expand. The way that God deals with his creation is basically across the board in the same way that he deals with nature. We have seasons in nature. You have summer, you have spring, you have fall, you have winter. And the reason why God uses those seasons is because it kind of forces us to change and it forces us to grow. In the same way he deals with nature, he deals with all of his creation, including us. And we will go through seasons. He takes us through these seasons so that we can grow, so that God can do something different. When we get completely comfortable and satisfied in a situation, to increase our capacity, he will oftentimes present us with a position where we are pushed out of our comfort zone so he can grow us and he can build our capacity to build. So you see, Isaac is comfortable and all of a sudden he's forced out of the situation through famine. And when looking at it from face value, you would think, wow, God is pushing him out. But what the enemy is designed to push you out and to defeat you, God is designing to pull you in to a blessing. He's trying to grow you and increase your capacity so that God can fill you back up again and bless you and grow you in the situation you're in. If you just stay there, you're always going to be the same. In 2014, maybe that's the way that you felt, that you were pushed around, that God wasn't blessing you, and that you were forced from one situation to another situation where you were once comfortable, now you are uncomfortable. You have to look at this situation, and it may not look as if what you think it is. God is trying to increase your capacity. He's trying to grow you, and what the enemy is designed to push you out, God is pulling you in to a new blessing in this new year of 2015. He's trying to increase your capacity to bless you. He doesn't want you to think that everything that you have generated, that everything that you have accomplished was on your own talent or that was on your own merit. Because he knows that pride comes before a fall, and that if you start taking too much credit, he wants to increase your capacity. He wants you out of your comfort zone to a place where you are uncomfortable and all that you have is him and all that you're reaching for is him. He's trying to increase your capacity to bless you, but it does not come without confrontation. And that's what God is doing. He's trying to challenge your capacity. You may have felt like you've been pushed out. You may feel like that God's not really trying to bless you in this season. That God is really just trying to increase. And it's not really what you think. God's trying to do something new. He's trying to do something different in your life. And that's the place where I want myself, and that's the place where I want our church, is to be a place where God is increasing our capacity. Maybe in a place that's a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's in a place that's a little bit challenging. But God is trying to increase and God is trying to grow us. You think the blessing sometimes comes to comfort you, but really sometimes the blessing is to challenge you. See, we want the blessing to comfort us. We want things are tough, things are difficult, things are confrontational, and we want the blessing to come and comfort us in our confrontational situation, in our unknown. But oftentimes the blessing that God gives us is meant to confront us and to challenge us, to increase our capacity to all that we have to trust on is Him. So Isaac is in the situation. It's a blessing, really. If you finish the story, it's a blessing in disguise. Isaac is pushed out from what he knows. He's pushed out into his comfort zone. He's in this place called Gerar, which is a desert. And there's no water. And the wells that his father had dug now are stopped up. The Philistines came, they filled them up with dirt, and they're stopped up. And he has no water, he has no resource, and he's in this situation. Verse 12, Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold because the Lord had blessed him. The man became rich and wealthy. Verse 14, he had so many flocks and herds that the Philistines envied him, so that all the wells that his father's servants had dug up in the time of his father Abraham, the Philistines stopped up, filling them with earth. Here's the thing about God's blessing and about God's promise for you. That when God says a thing, when God promises a thing, when God blesses us, that blessing cannot be revoked. It cannot be taken away. The blessing is always there. So we know that the blessing is there. Once He speaks it, once He says it, it's going to be there. It's not the source that's the issue. It's the blocking, that there is a blockage there. That God had promised him that the blessing was there, but all of a sudden Isaac finds himself in a situation where that blessing is absolutely 100% blocked, that his flow is blocked. Now, when you go, and especially in that time, when you dig a well, that was like you staking a claim on, hey, this is my land. When you dig a well, it was like, hey, we're going to be here for a while. We're digging a well. This is where we're going to get water. This is our main resource. This is how we're going to live. This is how we're going to survive. This is our particular land. So when the Philistines came and took Abraham's, now Isaac's, wells and filled them up full of water, it wasn't just vandalism. This was like an act of terrorism. Water was more precious than gold in this particular time, in this particular area in the desert where there was no water. And they came and they filled these things up. And so Isaac finds himself in a situation where what he needed was absolutely 100% blocked. And how we relate and apply the story today is that the Philistines represent whatever is coming against you, whatever is trying to stop you, whatever is blocking you. What you have to identify is, what is blocking the blessing of God getting to me? What is blocking the flow? What is blocking me from getting into the zone? Chances are it's probably a foreign object. A foreign object is something that's stuck in a place where it does not belong, and it's causing a major issue. In the same way, Isaac had the wells. He had the resources. The problem wasn't the resource. The problem was there was a contamination in the resource that the Philistines, the enemy, had come and they had blocked those things with foreign objects. In 2015, what we have to identify is, what is the foreign object that is blocking the flow, that is blocking God from doing amazing things in your life? There is a foreign object that has inserted itself into the flow of God using you in an incredible way. God has been blessing all year. You might think like, hey, you know what? As I look back at 2014, I kind of doubt the fact that God was trying to bless me because I didn't really receive anything. Maybe there was a blockage. Maybe there was a foreign object that had caused an issue. What you have to do is identify that and actively remove it. If you get something stuck in your eye, what happens? You get a foreign object stuck in your eye you can't see, and it's scratching your eye, and it limits your vision. You get something stuck in your throat, and you can't talk, and you cough. And it's horrible. You get something stuck in your digestive system, and it causes an issue. It's a foreign object. It does not belong there, and it causes issues. It stops the flow. Isaac finds himself in a situation where he has the wells, he has the resources, but the Philistines have come, and they have blocked what God is trying to do. What is blocking God's promise in your life? See, Satan can't take away the resource, but he can create a blockage. He can create a foreign object that gets in there that can stop God from moving, that can stop the blessing happening in your life? What kind of foreign object is blocking you? We have habits, you have habitual sin, stuff that you keep going back to, stuff you want to stop but you actually can't, and it creates a disturbance and it creates a blockage. God's trying to move, God's trying to use you, but you have these issues that keep coming up in your life. And what happens is you can't have a regular relationship with Him because of all the blockages and because of all the foreign objects that have invaded the kind of relationship that you're supposed to have with Him. And it just causes a flow issue. You can't pray right. You can't worship right. It causes a disturbance in what God is trying to do in you. What you have to do in 2015 is discover and identify what that is and literally remove it. And this is what I want to challenge you with today. It's probably not going to take a scoop or two. It might take a couple shovelfuls. It might take a truckload. What's taken you 46 years to get into the situation that you're in is not going to be easily deleted in 46 minutes. It might take some time to remove whatever blockage that has invaded your flow and God blessing you in the way that He wants to bless you. So you have to identify what that is. The sin that has so easily entangled you is what Paul said. That whatever it is that has invaded your life, that has created a blockage and stopped this flow of God blessing you in your life. We can sing worship songs that have incredible meaning all week long. We can come here together week after week after week and sing these incredible songs. But unless we're willing to remove this blockage and address whatever it is that has nestled into our lives and stopping the flow of God using us and blessing us, nothing will ever change. That we will literally become stuck, that we will literally become blocked. And so Isaac does something very interesting. We see his wells had become stopped. In verse 19, Isaac's servants dug in the valley and discovered a well of fresh water there. But the herders of Gerar quarreled with those of Isaac and said, "The water is ours." So he named the well because they disputed with him. It goes on and on. Verse 23, from there he went up to Beersheba. That night the Lord appeared to him and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and increase the number of your descendants for your sake, for the sake of my servant Abraham." Isaac built an altar and called the name of the Lord. There he pitched his tent, and his servants dug a well. Meanwhile, Abimelech came to him from Gerar with his personal advisor, the commander of his forces. Isaac asked him, "Why have you come, since you were hostile to me and sent me away?" Verse 28, we clearly saw that the Lord was with you, as so we said, we ought to be a sworn agreement between us. Isaac dealt with the issue. He was like, you know what, it's not even that I have to go dig even new wells. That God maybe will bless you from an old well. An old resource that you thought was stopped, God might bring that back and say, you know what, you don't have to dig a new well. You just have to go unblock the old wells that were blocked. I'm trying to bless you, but because these things have been clogged and you've allowed the enemy to come in and you're not willing to dig these things out, then the flow is stopped and the flow is blocked. But it's not really what you think. I'm not trying to give you anything new. I'm just trying to get you to go back to what you knew that was old. And maybe that's what God is going to do in 2015, a resource that you have stopped. Or a relationship that you maybe thought was blocked, that God is going to open up. An area of your life that you thought could not be resurrected, that it was done, it was old, it was dead. God may bring that back. It's not that He's going to give you a new thing. He's maybe going to resurrect and fulfill an old thing that you thought was dead. That He wants you to unblock some of these things and look back and have faith. That, hey, you know what? You remove the foreign object from something that He has already given you, and the resources and the flow of God will begin to bless you in this new year. See, what we want God to move in our lives, and we look up for a miracle, and we ask God to bestow upon us blessings from above. And God, would you move on my life? Would you bestow upon me? When really the blessing and the miracle is not really necessarily going to come from above. It's going to come from within us. When we just unblock some of those things, those wells, remove some of those foreign objects and allow the blessing of God to flow, it's going to come from Him, but it will flow through us, through an obedient heart that has surrendered to God and said, you know what, I'm going to do what you called me to do. I'm going to trust in you. I'm going to sow, and I'm going to remove any foreign object that has caused any kind of blockage in the kind of relationship that I want to have with you. And when I can remove those things, the wells will flow. The blessings of God will flow, and I will grow, and I will become exactly who you have called me to be if I can just surrender myself what you would think is a push out, or what you would think is a rejection, or what you would think is some kind of a situation where you have been removed. Sometimes God uses those things. God guides us through the things that He opens for us, but He also guides us through the things that He takes away. And you have to recognize it's not always what you think. The situation that you are in, your outlook for the new year may be dire, but maybe what you think the enemy is pushing you out of, God is pulling you into, and He's going to use you and bring His blessing to a fulfillment in this new year if you can just focus on getting into the zone and receiving your flow and allowing God to bless you by removing some of these little foreign objects that have gotten in the way of God using you in an incredible way.